you know, for her. I just was wondering if my page worked, and obviously it didn't. Or it would have been 500.
You've done it. What'd you do with all the extra talk?
Not much extra.
Did she sell it right out?
I didn't get down there since the last day.
Right, not decisions, just comments.
Well, she's closed now. Yeah, I was meaning to get down right before Mother's Day, right? She closed right
I
after.
haven't received the Winston wire by electronically.
I was meaning to get down there and take it.
Let me check.
One of those things that pass.
Good evening. I'd like to call the regular Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, June 5th, 2023 to order.
Candace Bouchard.
Jonathan Morehart.
Candy Perez.
Josh Kelly.
Todd Archelashi.
Glenn Albanese.
Steven Sedlak.
Linda Grappo.
Jack Bork. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda review. Steve, are you gonna table D?
I'll do that when we come to it.
Okay. Seeing none, can I have an approval of the minutes from our regular meeting on May 15th?
Someone?
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Linda. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Item 5, citizens' comments. Hold on, I'll get to you in a second. This will be your chance to speak on the budget. We will not be taking any action on the budget tonight, as we'll be listening to your suggestions for the budget. So now is your chance to speak on the budget. Captain, sir.
Yes, Captain Kosinski, 105A Standard Avenue. I'm going to make this short because I know I'm going to get the glazed look and the Walter Matthau look also from some of the members here. This is directed directly at the mayor. I presented you packets with documentation which include part of the town charter, the ACLU, which had federal and state law posted and situation concerning situation which involved freedom of speech, plus Title 18, Section 242. And at the last meeting, you explained to me that you had a conversation with Kevin Nelligan, but you didn't produce any rule, policy, law, nothing. All I said is you had it, and the 3-minute discussion rule stands. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. It's invalid as far as I'm concerned. What does Kevin Nelligan have to say about the law concerning the freedom of speech in the 5 and 10-minute ruling, which, as far as I'm concerned, still stands today, as of right now. So if you guys want to play 3 minutes, that's your choice. I will take 5 or 10 minutes as I see fit. And if you feel that I'm threatening on civil disobedience, well, you know, so be it, because then you'll have to go call downstairs, get a really hefty looking police officer come up here, take this 100% disabled veteran, put me in manacles, and I'm getting at least, I'll get 3 hots and a cot for the night. But I want to hear what ruling Mr. Nelligan has proven, and he's got to go, let's put it this way, he cannot go below federal law. He's got to deal with the federal law.
I never said I had a conversation with Mr. Nelligan. I
You
said
you had
I had,
Let him finish.
from the American Bar Association, they said that a board may limit the amount of time if they vote on the time to accept the amount of time for public comment.
Correct. And
Which
we
is what
all
this
know
board has
that
done.
We had a long sentence, I went back, I looked at all the recorded media, which isn't registered and so forth, and there was a big discussion. I mean, it was not illegal at that point to change and manipulate it from a 5 and 10 minute ruling, because at the time, the Democratic majority had their undies in a knot, because they couldn't handle criticism or sarcasm. And that is why all of a sudden, in whatever back room they decided, they took a vote, 5 went and said, oh, we're gonna change it and drop it down to 3 minutes. No, that was illegal. I did my research, I know what I'm talking about, because Jay Butterhazy got bullied, I got bullied, David LaPointe got bullied, James Roberts got bullied, okay? John Gauthier got bullied, Martha Sterling got bullied, and whatnot, and a lot of other people got bullied to keep to the 3 minute rule, which was illegal, and it's still illegal, all right? Until that changes, you're gonna have to just deal with me. I will personally, equity is my forte. I would never deny you the joy of recreational acid reflux disease. All right? Enjoy it, because I'm gonna have fun being up here discussing this over and over and over again until somebody comes up and points out the ruling. Now, I called up the Boston Law. My proctor and admiral, Brian Flanagan, he was professor of constitutional law up there. I'm not standing on what you said about that. I know what the constitutional law, and I've been dealing with constitutional lawyers for a long time. So this is where it stands. End the conversation, have fun.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else for public comment? Troy? Nope, whoever.
I'd like to ask the board to not put back the same budget and save the taxpayers' money, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy. Other comments? Is the mic on?
Yep.
Mic should be on. I left the mic on earlier. Yep.
Just tap on the.
Just pull it towards you and
Yeah,
talk
there you-
into it.
You're good.
There you go.
It's on.
Thank you. Let's see, because I'm a low talker. Can you hear me?
There you go.
All righty. This is in regards to the meeting from last week. Tonight, I'd like to talk about the budget and how I believe we should approach it. First of all, our main concern should not be how our town appears to outsiders, but rather how its residents feel about living here. With that in mind, affordability and living within our means is more important than cultural draws, which are a luxury. Residents' concerns regarding the affordability of living in town are legitimate and evidenced by the rate of inflation, the increased local property taxes, the roads improvement bond, and our huge reliance on grant money. There are also other concerns, such as likely future costs to the taxpayer, such as the Uniform Assessment Ratio Bill, which would increase the percentage of assessed property value used to calculate property tax amounts from 70% to 75%. Just another hit to the taxpayer. An increase of $2 million in our budget is simply not practical. In closing, I started by suggesting that you focus on the concerns of the residents of this town. This brings me to my final point, their ability to voice those concerns, whether on a campaign sign or voicing one's opinion at a meeting like this. Free speech is a constitutional right that cannot be denied. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Jerry Martinez, 117 Preston Road. I'd like to address 3 issues. The first being, I find it interesting that this board always seems to have magic when it comes to money. It seems like $200,000 is always the magic amount. Last year, when we mysteriously lost $200,000, you know, the Gilbert cut for $200,000. Now this year it's $200,000 on the town side, it's $200,000 on the education side. Is there another number you guys can come up with, like 175 or 350, just to make it seem like, you know, it's not, there's always $200,000 hanging around, and that's like our buffer in case something like this happens. Second, a lot of talk has been made about Josh's raise. One of the things I think that Josh actually did a disservice was not in the beginning when announcing his raise, was to actually put forth maybe like 5 different points as to the contribution that he's made to the town, as far as improvements in efficiencies, reduction in costs, some of these things, rather than just going up and saying, you know, because I'm the lowest paid town manager in the state, therefore we must give me money. I think it would have been much more palatable to the voters if you had stood strong, said, here are my qualifications, here's why I think I should get this, and I think that would have been handled much better than the way it was. And I hope you will do that, and I hope some of the selectmen will do the same, as to say why they thought you should get that. Candace said that you brought in $5 million in grants. Yes, that's true, but that's your job as well. So I think if you were to come across and explain to the townsfolk, the taxpayers, what this is, not just giving you that amount, but just what it was that you've done in the town. I don't know, because I'm not in town government, but I'd be curious to know, and I'd hope you would want to at least present that to the taxpayers. Finally, after last Thursday's special meeting, I was quite distressed that there was no empathy shown by any board member toward the taxpayers. The taxpayers, in their vote the prior Saturday, gave a strong, resounding no to the board. The reason why it failed is that the taxpayers who voted did not trust you. You did not come across with a valid reason for the increase. I think if you had come across and said, look, we understand your issues, we understand that it's difficult out there, not one word was mentioned to that effect. I think if you guys had come forward and say, look, how about if we meet you halfway and say $1 million, you know, we'll try to cut $1 million and leave another $1.6 million or whatever it was on the table. I think if you'd come across and say, hey, let's try to work this out, instead of trying to come with the type of rhetoric that I heard last Thursday night, where essentially some members here were alluding to the fact that the voters were too stupid to understand the quality budget that was presented. The fact that certain members here were attacking certain individuals for having the temerity to go out and run a campaign. A no, yes, a no vote, and that person has ran no vote campaigns ever since I can remember. It just so happens that the dog actually caught the tailpipe this time. So, and it actually proved his point that you guys are against free speech. Campaigning, as was just said earlier by Louisa Martinez, it's a right that each of us have. It should not be denigrated, and I hope that in the future that respect will be shown by this board to the voters, because they did have valid concerns. Not one of you showed any empathy for that. And you know, you can watch the tape. It's out there on YouTube. And I hope that this coming final months of this Board of Selectmen will finally try to do something where we actually get in sync with the voters, and hopefully a positive step forward. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Rob Astlin, 228 Smith Hill Road. I just have one question, and I'm a little concerned about it. There was no American flags flying on Main Street for Memorial Day. I remember growing up in this town, we used to decorate the whole street. I don't know what happened the last couple of years. There's been no flags. Any idea what's going on?
So I know that when they changed out the poles in, what was that, 2000 and,
20 years ago.
okay, so that would be 2004, 3, 4, they changed the poles. And they were never put back up. The hardware was never reinstalled.
The
if
only
I believe.
hardware's on the former poles, the tall silver ones, but not on any of the poles that are on Main Street for 20 years. Pardon?
On the decorative poles.
On the what poles?
Decorative.
No, yeah, on the decorative, none, but on the other poles, the ugly ones, I call them, those have hardware on them.
So why are there no flags on them?
The only time I've ever seen flags on them was once, since 2013, and they were put up by the veterans. I asked, because I was like, wow, how did those flags get there? And it was from the veterans that put them up that one time. That's all I remember. But the only other semblance of looking like flags are the Winchester 250 flags that worked for 2 years.
That's all.
That's getting changed as we speak.
Other speakers?
Go ahead.
Candy?
Yeah, Candy Perez, 605 West Wakefield Boulevard. I'd like to say that at the Memorial Day ceremony at the Green, which was held and organized by Selectman Bork and the Soldiers Monument, every single selectman was there. It was great to see the people that were honoring the Veteran of the Year and others. And when we looked out over at the people that were in attendance there supporting the Memorial Day and the patriotism around our soldiers, especially the ones that gave their ultimate lives for everything. It was good to see the people that were there, the Boy Scouts, some of the girls that were there with their troops as well, that were doing, putting flags out there and honoring everybody. So it was good to see everybody that was in the park that day. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing no comments, town manager's report.
Thank you, Todd. So tonight's been a night for discussion on economic development. For those of you who may not have made it all the way into the room, because it was just about standing room only, the sale of the bachelor school did pass. The final documents will be drawn up and will be reviewed by the Board of Selectmen and myself before anything is finalized and executed. But I do appreciate everybody who stayed with us through that process, not just tonight, but over the past year. We do have other economic development projects that are in the works. At 508 Main Street, the town is currently seeking quotes for different components of building restoration to determine how next steps of reuse of that building may be feasible. We also have an RFP out right now for the Mountainside Drive property that is up off of Wallens Hill Road. There was a lot of discussion tonight about the fact that people weren't aware of the Bachelor RFP when it was put out this time last year. I'm determined to make sure that that is not the case for Mountainside Drive. We've certainly been pushing it already with our different partners around the state out. I'm currently trying to reach out to a few of the different development agencies in Massachusetts and New York to try and spread this opportunity further. I know that there are questions and concerns from individuals, especially who live in that area, about what a development may look like. I want to make sure the public understands that this is a request for proposals. It is a standard government procedure, and we are looking for someone to come with us with a price proposal and a story to be told. Someone might come in and have all single-family homes, up for development. Someone may want to have a senior housing development. Someone may present something else entirely. We don't know what those are going to look like yet. But once all of those proposals are in, they will be public. They will be available to you. They will be discussed by this board. And I'm really excited to see how we can grow the grand list and really try and make strides in that area, as we've been doing all along. On the budget, the initial budget vote failed. We did have a special Board of Selectmen meeting, as was referenced in a few of the comments, this past Thursday to discuss possible reductions to be made to the budget. There is another special meeting that's being held tomorrow night, and the agenda is posted online. Very simple. We're considering and possibly acting on matters related to the budget. The annual budget meeting is reconvening 1 week from today at the Gilbert School at 7:00 p.m. That is the group, anybody who's a resident of the town or who is a property owner has the opportunity to come and vote, not just on final approval to push it forward to referendum, but also on line items. So I hope at the last annual town budget meeting, nobody was there to make a motion on any particular item and we still had a failed vote. So I appreciate those of you who are here to give public comment tonight. All of those public comments can be taken under advisement as the board moves forward with potential reductions at tomorrow night's meeting. And I hope that we can all get on the same page and look for next steps for our town. So we have a few other items that have been moving forward related to economic development. Papa's Market officially opened over at the former Honey Bun site. We have the expansion of the Little Red Barn Brewery and an axe throwing business that remain in development and are set to open. I've been hearing early July. Jury's still out on if they'll meet that deadline. We also have a couple other businesses that are set to open on Main Street, including Home and Cake, which is a bakery and home goods store, as well as others in development. I have been getting updates on fiber optic internet in town. Unfortunately, Frontier's communicated to me that some of their undergrounding work has been more expensive than they originally thought. If you haven't seen it come to your neighborhood yet, that's probably why at some point along the line they needed to go underground, and it's been more costly across the state than they thought it was going to be. So they are taking it in a bit more of a piecemeal fashion. I know that there are probably even some people in this room who already have had contact with Frontier and have been told that fiber has been run to their home, their building, and a lot of individuals in Winsted are being connected, but there are still entire neighborhoods that have not yet seen that service. I will do my best. I am going to put out a communication to the public about that and when you may be able to expect fiber to be connected to your neighborhood. I will try and continue to get updates and make sure that everyone's aware of what that process looks like. Related to grants, so last year, it's been pointed out a few times, we had a very good year for grants. We had a number of years in a row where we were going for grants that were offered routinely by the state to different municipalities. They weren't competitive grants. We were able to receive them. Last year, we had over $5.5 million in 2022 competitive grants that were received on top of what we've been able to receive in the past. This year, just with our congressionally directed spending application process, we have 7 projects that have been forwarded to the U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee, totaling $9.4 million. Those projects include $1.98 million for the construction of an addition on the Elm Street Firehouse, $96,000 for the digitization of land use records in Town Hall and the Town Clerk's office, $1.96 million for improvements to the town sewer plant, $640,000 for an extension of the sewer line down Rowley Street, $952,000 for improvements to 44 Elm Street, $1.86 million for improvements to the Tatros Pond Park area, including culvert and dam improvements, and $200,000 for the completion of the Sue Grossman Greenway in Winsted.
$2 million.
$2 million. Sorry, did I?
You said 200,000.
Oh, sorry, $2 million. Yeah, sorry, it's $2 million. That would complete it. $200,000 is not going to get the job done. It's $9.488 million in total. I'm very happy with how this is progressing. It's not a done deal at this point in time, but all of the proposals that went forward before the U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee from Winchester last year were approved for congressionally directed spending, and I'm optimistic. We did have some feedback from Chris Murphy's office that the applications that they received were pristine, and that's one of the reasons why we've had 7 applications move forward. We are the only town in the state to have so many move forward this year. So there are other grants that we're pursuing. All of these grants, I want folks to understand, they're one-time capital improvements. We are not trying to build a reliance on grants for the operation of our town, but it is really important for us to be able to complete our backlog of capital projects and to move forward. We need to have some of these grants coming in for these one-time costs. So we're looking to the CTDOT $800,000 connectivity grant offering that's currently being fielded by CTDOT as an opportunity for us to expand in a few other areas, bring some more money to capital improvements in town. Beyond that, for human resources, in May, all staff completed a self-evaluation. I'll have further conversations with the selectmen about how that's going. In June, I complete my annual evaluations of all staff, as well as, and the department directors complete evaluations for those under them. And again, I'll go through process and specifics as time progresses with the Board of Selectmen. We do still have a few days left for the Main Street Parking and Safety Survey. I have had the chance to see some of they're all anonymous, but I've had the chance to see the summary of results as it stands so far. As you can guess, a lot of people feel, it seems, that there's some speeding on Main Street and there's not a lot of parking on Main Street. But we want your input. As a business owner, as somebody who visits businesses on Main Street, maybe a resident of a Main Street or one of the abutting roads, we want to hear what you have to say about your experiences there. All of this information is going to help us create a better plan for Main Street, but more importantly, perhaps even more importantly, we are going to be able to use that data to advocate for grant funding to get that work done without having to burden the taxpayers. Because we all know that changes are needed to Main Street. I don't think anybody up here wants to ask the taxpayers for money to make those improvements to Main Street. So we need that data to come in. And thank you to everybody who's already taken the survey. Beyond that, I've had the opportunity since we last met to attend the Regional Realtors Association meeting. It was a great opportunity to get up and talk up Winchester, talk about what's happening here, all the different development, all of the different improvements that we have the opportunity to make right now. And I did make sure that group was well aware of the RFP process for Mountainside Drive. And it was wonderful to have the chance to go speak to that group. Beyond that, there was a spring edition of the Winchester Wire sent to residents in mid-May. I hope that everybody's had the chance to get that hard copy. I was told today that we still have yet to send out our electronic copy, so I will make sure that happens first thing tomorrow. If you aren't signed up for an electronic copy, you can do that on our website. And I think that's all the updates I have right now. Obviously, a lot more information to come about the budget after we have our further discussions tomorrow night. Any questions I can answer?
Any updates on Whiting Street? It was supposed to be complete on April 30th.
Yes. So Whiting Street, my understanding is that final improvements are being made this week. There were a couple days of rain, I know, put them behind. They were hoping to finish last Friday. Well, they had a few great weeks there, but they certainly had a lot of rain earlier in April, and then they had a little bit of rain last week. So they will be finishing up this week. We've already set up, we've got a couple people over to take pictures,
Will they be painting a
make sure
line
they
in the
know.
middle of it and all that?
I'm not sure if a line's supposed to go in the middle of it. I believe so, but let me confirm with, Jim Rollins is out right now, but with Phil Becerra.
And the Sue Grossman, the portion that was completed, there was landscaping that needed to be done. Has that been completed on the Sue Grossman Trail?
I haven't been down there in the last at least few weeks to see myself, but I'll check it out tomorrow and let you know.
And will we have road plans at our next meeting from Public Works?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Josh? Josh, just under the upcoming events, I know you noticed that June 19th, the town hall is closed. June 19th being being the national holiday of Monday. Just to remind people, the Soldiers Monument Commission is having an event on Sunday, June 18th. We would have conducted some special ceremony on June 19th, but the speaker we wanted to get and the program we wanted to get was not available for that Monday. So we are having an event on Sunday, June 18th at the Soldiers Monument. There'll be a special conversation, a special presentation.
Okay.
And I think it's 2 o'clock.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions for Josh? Seeing none, moving on to correspondence. Anyone have anything? Boards and commissions. Steve?
Thank you, Todd. I think all of you had received a letter of interest just today from Mason Kieswetter, who's interested in becoming a member of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Commission. And so we'll begin the vetting process for him. And we've begun the vetting process for Bradley Burkhoff, who is interested in a membership on the Recreation Board. And we'll take action on him at our next meeting, but I will place his name in nomination at this point. And that would be it.
Thanks, Steve. Moving on to item 9, unfinished business. Any action on the budget tonight? We have a special meeting with the superintendent tomorrow. That's when we'll be making any decisions. Anything from the board tonight? Item 10, discussion on the fiscal year 22 town audit with King and Associates.
Were you able to handle this? All right, so I'm gonna be working off of this. This is a summary that I do for pretty much all of our board presentations, and seems to work pretty well. Whether, if you want to save questions to the end or interrupt me as you go through, it's up to you.
We'll let you go through.
Okay. When I put it together, I do index it to pages of the audit report, so that we can look at it, or you can look at it later if you want. People tend to like this summary because they can write notes in it, things like that. The first page talks about the major sections. There's a lot of components to your audit. You can see there's actually 3 bound packages. And you do what's called an annual comprehensive financial report. It has a few extra schedules and letters in it. So I talk about the introductory section. There's actually an organizational chart, a transmittal letter that comes from the finance office. Then there's the main audit report, followed by a summary, management discussion and analysis. It's a very high-level summary. It's intended for readers of the financial statements. If people look them up, they can see bullet points on major factors that impacted the fiscal year's operations. And there's also some forward-looking information so that people can say, oh, what's happening in the next year's budget, which would be the budget that you're in now. Then there's multiple sets of financial statements. I know most of you have been on the board and you've heard this before, but there's at least 3 different sets of financial statements in the town audit, 3 different bases of accounting, which is what makes town audits very complicated and highly technical, and not many people are left doing them. Then there are some supplemental sections behind that, and then there are these 2 separate packages. One is a grant compliance audit.
Excuse me, I'm having a little trouble hearing, Todd.
Roy, can you
Take
take
it outside.
conversations out in the hall, please? Thank you.
I can't hear.
Sorry. There's a federal grant compliance audit. It's called a federal single audit. There's also a state compliance audit. We'll look at those a little bit later. And then there's another area of the audit that you don't see, but I've been, in the past few years, trying to inform boards. There's the State Department of Education actually has a separate set of procedures that we are specified to perform on the electronic reporting system that the Board of Ed uses to submit data to the State Department of Education, and they use that for formula grants and things like that. So that's a separate 4th package that is between, I guess, us and the State Department of Education, so it goes right to them. The superintendent is involved in certifying that and gets a copy as well. Then I go into highlights in the financial statements. Page 22 actually is already into your 2nd set of financial statements. These are on a fund basis. So your general fund balance was 9.5 million. It actually decreased. And later on, I'm going to mention how you had a budget surplus, yet your general fund decreased. And the main factor in that difference is because you had, through prior town meetings, you had approved and appropriated or committed fund balance towards capital projects. And that money was moved by the finance director out of the general fund into the various capital funds. So it had been temporarily held in the general fund, and it's kind of good to know that sometimes your general fund is a catch-all for some other funds that are not available for budgeting purposes. They're sometimes held there temporarily, and so you had a big move of those previously committed funds out into their respective funds during this past fiscal year. One of the other major funds that are presented is the ARPA fund. You had received half the ARPA money up front, and the story very similar in a lot of towns. A lot of the ARPA money you had received not spent by the end of this year. Then you got your second payment at the beginning of the year you're in now. You got to remember, I'm always a year behind. So, but a lot of people really have a lot of money left in this ARPA fund as they've been identifying projects, and we really think that in this next cycle of audits that are for the period ending June 23, we'll start to see some disbursement of those funds. One of the other major funds, and that's an accounting term, it's determined by size and significance of the activity in the fund, is the Hinsdale renovation project. As you can imagine, a good volume of activity going through there. I think $11 million in the fiscal year 22, between the grant money that was received and the bond proceeds that was in there. So you'll see that kind of popped onto the scene on this page 22 and 24 with the major funds. And then as the project wraps up, the fund will disappear as it gets smaller and ends. We also have, as part of the audit, is the water and sewer. They have their own funds. They're actually, other than, for example, the Hinsdale project, they're generally the largest funds, the most activity in the town. At the end of June 22, they had actually paid off all their old bonded debt. There were still some clean water funds. Those clean water funds, low interest loans, but you're in them for 40 years generally is what we see. So they just go on and on and on. The annual debt service on those is only about $38,000, and since yours ends in 27, that's actually pretty short term compared to what we've seen in some other places. Water and sewer both had positive cash flows from operations. That's good. And what I'm referring to, there's a cash flow statement on page 28, because if you have negative cash flow from operations, you can't pay off your debt and you can't reinvest any money into equipment and infrastructure. So it's kind of a key indicator, even though the statement of cash flows is a really complicated statement that mostly only accountants understand. I often point to that number. Are we positive from operations? If not, you're doomed. So anyway, that was positive. You also, the old pension plan is frozen to entrance, but a new entrance, but you have quite a few participants in the pension trust fund. Net investment return was negative 14%. Everybody saw that, because you got to remember this is the 12-month period ending June 30, 22. The year before you had a positive 25%. So I don't think you want to look at that as a really short-term return. You really got to look at multiple years, and the actuaries tend to smooth that out for you. The next page is a graph showing fund balances. The most current is on the left side, 22. And you can see that the total of the stack, which is general fund balance, is lower. But that yellow portion is a lot smaller. And that's where that capital money was transferred out. That was the majority of that change. But the blue portion, which is unassigned, that actually grew. So that growth in the blue represents the prior year budget surplus, while the decrease in the yellow represents the capital funds that were approved and now are distributed out to the capital projects fund. Then I move through onto page 44. Page 44 is a schedule of your long-term debt. Not only is it traditional bonds and loans, but it also shows your various pension liabilities. Because of the decrease in the pension assets, or at least one of the major factors being the decrease in the pension assets, you did have an increase in your pension liability. And again, that's actuarially computed. It looks out generally 20, 30 years. That's not a one-year adjustment that you have to come up with. Conversely, you also have employees who are in the state MERS plan, the Municipal Employee Retirement System plan, and your liability in that state plan actually went down 1.4 million. They're invested in the same market, but their assets are smoothed out, so you don't see spikes. They actuarially turn into smooth curves and arcs, so they tend to be a little behind. And then the other bullet point I have here is the OPEB liability, which is other post-employment benefits. That's for retirees. That's also a actuarially determined liability. And there you showed a decrease of $500,000. So that debt shows not only traditional debt, but also your basically employment or post-employment related liabilities. There's also a schedule of future debt payments. The only significant one was the school bond, the $5 million bond that you had. And then I refer to the certified teachers plans, which are fully funded by the state, but you are a participant or your employees are participants in that plan. So they're required to be disclosed in your notes, even though you have no liability. So I include here your share of the state plan for your certified teachers in town is $17.5 million, of which the town is currently not responsible for any. The state put in $1.5 million towards that plan last year. I include that because sometimes there's discussion of balancing the state budget and towns taking on 10% or 20% of the cost. That hasn't happened lately. And with current budget surpluses, I don't expect it would. But there's also the teachers, the state sponsors a post-retirement health insurance subsidy that's available to teachers. It's a lot smaller. Your share of that state plan is $1.9 million. The state only put in $35,000 last year. I mentioned your fund balances. This is the budget, pages 68 to 71. This is your line item budget, which would be the most comparable financial statement to what you would get from your own finance office. And it did have the net increase. So again, I just wanted to explain how you could have a decrease in fund balance, but while you have a surplus in your budget. And then I mentioned on page 85, your outstanding taxes at year end, property taxes was $731,000. That was an increase over the prior year, not a notable increase, but it was higher. We look at that in comparison to the levy for our testing, and we would respond to that. We generally see that 2 or 3 to 8% is about normal. If your taxes outstanding were above 8%, we would probably start to modify our testing in the tax department and look at something different and see why that uncollectible amount is trending up. But you can see at 2.85, you're on the low side of what we consider to be normal, so that's good. We also, the past few years, we've looked harder at the building offices, permitting, the fee calculation of permits. We've done this with various towns. Before that, we were focusing more on assessments, and that kind of got us into the building office because we were looking at building permits, because your tax base is often built on or supplemented by building permits, and we were testing to see how quickly COCs were processed and the changes in the permits were brought into the grand list to make sure that people were paying the proper taxes. So we do that. We rotate through and put different emphasis on different departments. Part of what we're supposed to do is be unpredictable. We did the same thing every year. It might allow people to try to scheme around us. So when people say, gee, you didn't ask for that last year, we consider that a good thing, because now they know that we're moving around and asking for different types of evidence. Then we have the page on the federal and state single audits. Now, a lot of your money that we call federal comes through the state, but it's federally sourced. So we distinguish between federally sourced, a lot of education money is federally sourced, sometimes DOT, versus state that comes out of the state budget, such as town aid roads. So in the federal single audit, you had $3.5 million of federal money. This is not awarded. I know you were talking about awards you're applying for, receiving. This is expended. So there's often a time lag between when you think you get a grant award and when they show up in the audit. So you expended $3.5 million of federal funds. A big chunk of that was the $850,000 for the clean water grant for water lines. And we already had a planning session with town staff, both the town and the Board of Ed, looking forward to the June 23 year. And it sounds like this the Clean Water Fund is going to be pretty active, and it's going to be even much more than $850,000 that was spent in the year that you're in now. $580,000 was for school nutrition programs, and $850,000 was COVID-related education funding. So that's Coronavirus Relief Fund, ESF, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. We're thinking We probably have seen the peak of that. It's gonna start coming down in '23. Probably while the ARPA town money is going up in '23 and '24. So I'm happy to say we had no findings related to federal grant audits or general financial statements. The state single audit, it's almost the same procedure. We get a single an audit guide from the state of Connecticut, and we look at the state grants. You had $18.7 million of state-sourced assistance that you expended. 8.4 million was ECS and 7.7 was related to the Hinsdale School project. And then there's a number of others. There's town aid roads, sometimes there's some in the police department, town clerk's office, but they're generally a lot smaller. We did have one finding. You know, you could say it's not serious, but we're required to report it because the state sets the parameters of what we have to test and what's determined non-compliance. There was a form filed with OPM, and it's supposed to be filed on September 30th, and it was filed late. I kind of somewhat roll my eyes. The first year this form came out, they forgot to tell the towns that it was out, and the first audits that we issued, we started reporting findings that they were late, and then OPM said, oh wait, we forgot to tell the towns that they had to file this report. This is the same report, so that's why we have to report it. Finance director has addressed it. Part of the delay was she had gone back, similar to like I said with the capital project funding, she wanted to get all that money into the right pots. She was going back and looking at some grants, particularly grants where you expend money and get reimbursed from OPM, and they show up on this report. So she was actually spending some extra time making sure she had all the data together before she submitted. So there's a response in the audit and a corrective action plan to the state that says all this. So it's really not, I don't see it being a big deal, or at least in the future, it should not be an issue. I have a page here on current accounting and auditing topics. Auditing and accounting standards change, particularly for governments. The big change that happened about 2001, I think, was statement number 34. Now we're looking at implementing statement number 100 next year. So in less than 20 years, we have 70 new accounting pronouncements that we have to deal with and implement. There's a big one on leases, so we had to evaluate your lease agreements. It didn't really impact you. Some people, if you were leasing real estate, you would have had these weird intangible assets showing up on your balance sheet and pulling more liabilities onto the balance sheet. So it could happen depending on any future lease contracts you enter into, but it did not impact this year. Upcoming for this year, and we talked in our planning meeting, there's an extension of this called subscription-based IT arrangements. Now we are required to look at long-term software agreements and determine if those long-term software agreements really result in you having ownership of the software and then pulling those liabilities again onto your balance sheet and then creating an asset representing your right to use that software asset. I'm going to be in, it's a very complicated concept, and I'm actually going to be in a training session tomorrow on that. Our group of auditors, the few of us that are left, we have dragged the State Department of Education into our meetings to try to express some of the difficulties that come from some of the mandates they come out with in relation to education finance. I mentioned the EFS work that we do earlier. They tend to, in late October, drop a bomb on us and tell us, oh, you have to do this. And we say, well, but you want it done by December 31st, and you just told us now. Also, their work that they require is due December 31st when town audits are due. And we have requested repeatedly to change one of the due dates because it's become very difficult to file audits timely. As a matter of fact, as of today, there are 30 towns in the state that are not yet filed for June 30, 22. So 30% of towns are filed on time. And we're trying to tell the Department of Education and OPM, part of the problem is you keep laying all this work on us and you have the same due dates. Can someone move their due dates at least 30 days? And they both say, no, we'll just grant extensions. And so we had this discussion in our planning meeting a few weeks ago, and I said to Anne Marie, the problem is it looks like you're delinquent. You know, you may go to your council and say, we're going on extension, and it reflects negatively. But I said, I'll let them know that only 30% of the towns are filed on time now, and it's getting worse. So we're having these discussions where we're trying to get someone to budge, but they won't. They say it's set in statute. And then I've talked about ARPA a couple times, so our testing will probably gravitate more towards disbursement of ARPA funds in the next audit cycle or two. But that's what we do. We rotate and we move to what we consider to be current risks. And that's the end.
Questions from the board? Candy?
So you would say we're in good shape?
It's hard to get me to say
Say
that. But I skipped over one of the benchmarks. It's the third page, when I talk about page 22. One of the benchmarks that's out there widely used from the Government Finance Officers Association, they say you should have 2 months of revenues in your fund balance, which is 16.67% of your budgeted revenues. I have the calculation here that you're at 22%, so you certainly met that benchmark.
The state legislature, I think, did something with the pension requirements that are supposed to benefit us. Do you know anything about those? They're supposed to make it so we don't have to put as much money in.
CMERS.
Oh, it's into MERS?
Yeah.
Okay. No. I mean, I hear discussion.
I can't share, actually. Anne Marie was on the working group for that committee. I'm sure she'd be happy to speak to it further.
Well, I just want to know if it, if it impacts this current year, or if it's future years, but, all right. When you talk about teachers, the money you have in the audit that you have to record for teachers, is that K-12 in town, or just pre-K-6 special ed to 21?
Yeah, it would be K through 6, yes. And any other special ed employees.
When you said we had the tax collections were down a little bit, would that have been because we had changes in the tax collector's office, or you think that was just from people after the pandemic didn't have the money?
The change in the tax collector's office happened on July, I believe, our previous tax collector's last day in the office was July 8th last year. So it would not have been a result of that. Sorry, so in the current fiscal year, that change occurred, not in last fiscal year.
And then the state, in the new legislation too, the state, you were talking about the State Board of Education, they're also gonna be asking schools to report on more things rather than the chart of accounts. Is that gonna be something that impacts us as well?
So, I don't know. One of the things that we've been in discussion with them is they have us do PSIS testing, which is demographics, and we're asking, why are your auditors who are auditing financial statements testing demographic information?
Yeah.
They had pushed with the Uniform Chart of Accounts. They were supposed to expand that to include a lot of non-financial information, both on the town side and the Board of Ed. And then that all cratered after a few $1 million was spent on it. So I don't know on that. I know we keep pushing back and saying, get us out of the demographics business and let us just do financial statements.
Thank you.
Other questions? Just on the annual financial report, our pension trust fund net investment return was down. How's that compared to other towns?
Very similar.
Similar?
Yeah. There's actually a chart of returns, annual returns. I mean, your last downturn year was 2016 at 3%. It was just the timing. Everyone, June 30 must have been a really low point in the market because everyone's up quite a bit from that point. You gotta remember, just a measurement as of June 30. Like even calendar year could be vastly different than the fiscal year.
Thank you. No other questions? Thank you, sir. Item B, 23-41, consideration and approval of a Neighborhood Assistance Act tax credit program for the American Mural Project.
So we have some information that was sent along to us from the American Mural Project, and there's correspondence that's been attached in your packets related to this. There's a proposal for the Neighborhood Assistance Tax Credit Program that has to be submitted through the town. The town needs to support this in order for the American Mural Project to be able to receive $24,500 for an exterior vestibule to be constructed. So, as we do with many of our community partners, it's my recommendation that the Board of Selectmen review the attachments and approve and authorize me to sign anything that's needed to move forward with this application. I think it's a great thing. Anything that we can do to continue to invest in and have exterior funding invest in the different offerings that we have here in town, including the American Mural Project, is a positive thing. So I have a recommended motion for you at the bottom of the cover page, but I recommend that this be supported wholeheartedly. Andy?
Yeah, make a motion that we allow the town manager to sign the Neighborhood Assistance Act tax credit program for the American Mural Project. We've done this a bunch of times over the past couple of years for them. We have asked in the past just for a short report at the end that the project was installed. And so I would ask the same thing this time.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
Josh, a question, municipal information to, it's blank. Is it to be completed by the municipal agency overseeing implementation of the program?
By the town manager.
I would expect so.
Are you the municipal agency
Yes.
because you're the liaison?
Yes. Upon approval from this body, I will fill that out on your behalf.
Yeah, we had confusion over that one year.
Okay.
No, we fixed it.
Any other
Josh,
discussion?
does the money go directly to them, or it come to the town, and then we then give it to them?
My understanding is that it goes directly to the American Mural Project.
I believe it's allowing the people that donate the money to get the tax deduction.
Yeah.
I like their form. I think we should adopt it for other programs we have.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous? Congratulations, Ruth. Item C, discussion on the State Department of Education study regarding funding of the Gilbert School.
Todd, I initially requested this, and I'm going to request this evening that we hold discussion of the Gilbert School report off until after the town budget passes. So I would move to table discussion on the Gilbert School report until such time as the municipal budget is passed.
Second.
Thank you, Candace. Discussion? All in favor? Jack, were you in favor? Jack, were you in favor?
I'm in favor.
Unanimous. 23-42, consider and possibly act on the interim tax collection policy.
So I will preface this discussion by once again stating that it was the board's intention to have decisions made related to the budget at tomorrow night's meeting. I want to make sure you all understand I'm presenting this to you tonight for informational purposes. If you feel comfortable with it, you have the opportunity to approve. If you'd like to sleep on it, so to speak, and table it to tomorrow's meeting, that would be acceptable. Tomorrow's meeting agenda is very inclusive of any discussion and vote that needs to be taken in order to move the budget forward, which of course includes an interim tax collection plan. But let me give you a little background, and then a motion can be made one way or the other. Due to the initial failed budget referendum, the town doesn't yet know what the final mill rate needs to be for 2024. So given the situation, the Board of Selectmen has two options in front of it. The first is to authorize the tax collector to issue separate installments of personal property and real estate bills for a mill rate, which would be based on the new grand list, to levy taxes totaling last year's annual budgeted total. Motor vehicle taxes have to be deferred either way. But the second option is to defer all property taxes, all of those bills, until after a budget has been formally adopted. So again, first, you have two separate installments, one that goes out now with a mill rate equal to last year's budget total and to collect on that level, and then you'd send out a second bill later on once a budget has formally been adopted. The second is to defer the issuing of property taxes, do it all at once. So we've had a lot of conversations in town hall about what the best approach is. My understanding is that there is a past practice, and I think that my recommendation is in line with that past practice. I can let you all speak to that a little bit further. If we authorized a partial bill to go out now and a second bill to go out later, we're doubling the cost of our tax collection procedure for the summer months. It's not necessarily something that you want to see in the mail twice as a taxpayer. From both a psychological perspective as well as the town's financial perspective, I don't believe that option number one makes sense, to send out two separate tax bills when you could simply be collecting all at once. If we are to wait for the budget to be finalized, adopted, and send out one tax bill all at the same time, a deferral, so to speak, that would allow us to send out just one bill. We have had a review done by our town treasurer. She firmly knows and understands that we can operate the town through the end of August with no other input. We don't need to collect taxes until that time. If she actually said perhaps as far as the end of September. So we have the opportunity to defer. You also, as the Board of Selectmen, have the opportunity, if we go down the road, I know what outcome we're all hoping for, but I think we also understand that there are other outcomes and paths forward. If there was some reason why we weren't ready to issue a single bill to go out at the end of June, early July, we would be able to come back, convene, and send multiple tax bills at a later date if you so chose. So my recommendation right now is to direct the tax office to defer the issuing of property tax bills until after the budget has been formally adopted, or until such a time as you give them a further set of directions.
I'll make that motion. I'll motion that the Board of Selectmen direct the tax collector to defer the issuance of any tax bill until at least after a second referendum of the budget can be held.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Yeah, only until after, I think, after this next referendum, defer until after that. But if we end up in another referendum, then I would want to send out two different bills.
Right.
Because you need to collect money.
Yeah, this says after the second one, yeah.
Well, he had talked about deferring it until it passed, and then you said the second one.
No, yeah, it says second, I agree with that, yeah.
Josh, just for edification of information regarding what does it cost to send out a bill, tax bills twice? What's the total cost?
When you take into account all of the printing, the mailing, individualized tax bills, everything that goes into it, you're talking over $10,000.
And you're also talking two fees. If the resident pays with a credit card, there's a credit card fee. And if they have to pay multiple times, it's multiple fees.
That's true, too.
All in favor? Unanimous? '23-43, refunds as recommended by the Collector of Revenues.
We have three proposed refunds for you tonight. They are all motor vehicle related. We have two certificates of correction and one overpayment. The total refunds requested by the tax collectors, $256.11. And I recommend that it be approved as presented.
This first person, I am the second owner of the house. I'm surprised that still has a registered vehicle in our town, since he hasn't lived in our town for a while. Anyway,
Well, apparently not anymore, if he has the certificate of correction on that.
Yeah.
But
Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Selectmen authorize the refunds recommended by the Collector of Revenue in the amount of $256.11.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Item 23-44, proposed line item transfer.
all right, we've got a bunch of these in a row. I will try and be brief but clear. The first one's easy because I wrote it. I have a couple deficiencies in two different line items. That's office supplies and office equipment. We've seen a significant increase in different costs, whether it be toner, whether it be, you name it, in the office. And you'll see that office supplies and equipment are a theme throughout the other transfers that we'll discuss tonight. But we have had a remarkable lack of time to spend at different training and education events. So the good news is we have some savings in that account that can be transferred into the office supplies and office equipment lines, totaling $328 even, and I would recommend that the transfer be made as presented.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Hey, Jonathan, discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? $23-45, proposed line item transfer.
Yep, so we have a request here. This is from the Department of Community Planning and Development Land Use Office. And that is to take $833 from the software line and transfer it over to overtime, training and equipment, and vehicle allowance. So we have had some turnover in this department this past year. We've had individuals going to different trainings. We've been trying to get individuals into different training programs. We've had to spend some overtime making sure we're all caught up on different state reports, whatever's needed. So it's not a lot of money, it's $833, but we did also have a delay in the amount of time we had our online permitting software go live. So that didn't go live until October. We had a few months where we weren't paying for those fees. We have an excess of $833 that can come from software to go to these other lines, and I recommend that the transfer be made as presented.
Is there a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Linda. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? 23-46.
So this is the other half of our land use office. Don't forget, next year they'll all be one singular budget, but for this year's purposes, I know I've said it, but I'm very excited about it. Bill Petroface is now a fully certified building official in the state of Connecticut, which is no small feat, and it's really lucky for us to have one who's dedicated just to Winchester, because so many towns have to split and share and everything else. But what we had to do while Bill, one of the large draws here is because Bill was not certified, we did have to have somebody certified coming to sign off on documents that he had prepared. So we had Jim Clark, who was our building official. He's over in Falls Village, Canaan Falls Village, and he came over and offered his services up to make sure that Bill was headed in the right direction, make sure that by state standards we were compliant, but that did cost money. Not, again, anything that's going to break the budget, but it's enough that it's significant. We had to make sure that we were able to find the money in these various line items. Luckily, we were able to find it all in the same department to cover this additional cost. So you have a number of different lines here that, for various reasons, we did not need to tap into. Most notably, the demolition of buildings. Any building that we have on the docket right now to have some level of demolition is on the blight list, which means that the money will come from blight funds. We don't have anything that falls outside of that definition right now, so almost half of the funds will be able to come from that demolition of buildings line, and we were able to find piecemeal the other bit together. I recommend that $8,741 be transferred from the lines as presented to the secretarial and support staff within the building department.
I'll have that motion.
Thank you. Jack, second? Thanks, Jonathan. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? 23-47, proposed line item transfer.
So you have in front of you, this is again intra-departmental transfer. This is for the recreation department. The request is that you have $1,005 come from the general labor line, and you have $1,000 go to fringe benefits, medical benefits, and you have $5 go to membership dues and subscriptions. I don't know how this was missed, but through a variety of circumstances, the finance department never caught, nor did our director of finance ever catch that per the union contract, she is eligible to receive a $1,000 waiver for not taking health coverage. it's defined as all employees, not just full-time employees. She's a part-time employee, but she's eligible for that $1,000 waiver. This is the first year where she will ever receive it, but once it was discovered, we are, of course, making that payment to her for this year. We did have a conversation where it wasn't discovered in prior years. It's not going to be paid out for prior years. But that's the $1,000 that needs to be covered. It wasn't budgeted for in last year's budget, or in this current year's budget, but it is currently in next year's budget. We've made sure. And there's another $5 that was tacked on to the recreation, CT Parks and Rec Association dues went up by $5. That wasn't budgeted for. So they have an additional $1,005 in the general labor line that can cover these transfers, and I recommend that this transfer be approved as presented.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Steve. Discussion?
How come she gets 1,000, we only get $9.99?
You only get $9.99.
That's your paycheck.
Yeah, let me look into that for you. That doesn't sound right.
Josh, just to be clear what
I
you
got $1
said.
somewhere.
I just want to be clear what you said. That money is in the 23-24 budget.
Yes, it is budgeted.
All in favor? Unanimous? 23-48, proposed line item transfer.
And for the record, even with my proposed $70,000 cut to the health insurance line, it will remain covered. So we have proposed transfer, I believe this is our last one, from the senior center. There have been overages. I told you that those office supplies would come back in. In our office supplies line, we have increased costs in electricity, which we all knew was coming, as well as maintenance of structures. We've been trying to put, as you've seen, I think in the capital improvement plan, there's a significant amount of money going into fiscal year 2024 for the improvement of the space at the senior center. They've been trying to do as much as they can on the maintenance of structures this year, so as just in case something has to be cut, for example, and the budget failed, they would have an opportunity to have, a little bit of padding. But we have an opportunity right now to invest further in maintenance of structures. There are some lines where Jen was able to go through, Jen Kelly, our Director of Senior Services, and identify exactly what she won't be needing for the end of the year. That includes some money for maintenance of vehicles. A few of the programs haven't needed the full funding that was budgeted. And I recommend that the transfers be made as presented, totaling $10,000.
Do you have a motion? Thank you, Linda. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Steve. Discussion? All in favor? Section 11, citizens' comments and reports.
I need something to do with maritime.
Seeing none, moving on to item 12, executive session to include the town manager for discussion on the possible sale of town-owned land and discussions on strategy and negotiations of contracts. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? 855. We'll come find you.
I'll wake you up.
What day you get back? good to see you.
I don't have to go find it.
I didn't move. Do you need signatures for tomorrow's meeting or anything? What's that? Do you need signatures for tomorrow's meeting or anything? I don't think so.
So those sheets with the reductions, they all have the account numbers on them.
I think they did.
Just so that we know. Could you imagine it would be like this? Like a year and a half ago? It'd be like-
Well, I've heard stories and rumors about how harsh people can be and time in the present day. Things like this.
Yeah, take care of my work, yeah.
Everybody ready?
Yes.
Good evening, we're back from executive session at 10:25 PM. There's no action to be taken at this time. There are no citizens' comments. Steve,
I move we adjourn.
Second.
all in favor? Thank you.
Josh, you got those two papers I gave you.
Right here.
You want to take this back up?